And there's this sense of timelessness about your designs that they're not guitars that look like the 1990s.
This is very interesting what you tell me now, and it makes me just think about it, because it's just my guitars, it's my daily work, it's the reason why I'm allowed to listen to audiobooks working, so I just build them. But there is something understandable in that, and I try to figure out. I agree, so they might be somehow timeless, because if I would step out of my skin and look at this instrument, I also would do hard to put them into a certain epoch.
Today's episode of Life with Strings Attached was filmed on location in southern Germany in the workshop of Ulrich Teuffel. Teuffel has been building electric guitars since 1988. He is a trained automotive mechanic and studied industrial design in the 1990s. His models Birdfish, Tesla, Niwa, and Antonio are radically independent, but always follow a leitmotif. They can now be found in the museums and collections, as well as the hands of other musicians such as David Thorne, Kirk Hammett, Billy Gibbons, Henry Kaiser, Ludwig Göransson, and Hans Zimmer. For Ulrich Teuffel, Leo Fender is the most important guitar maker of the 20th century. For many of today's guitar makers, Teuffel's work exists on its own plane, elevated to a level that few will ever achieve. For me, Ulrich, or Uli, as he's commonly known among friends, has been a refreshing and inspiring colleague and friend. Together, we can explore concepts and ideas that stretch and challenge each other, feeding our minds and souls. I find conversations with Uli exceptionally invigorating. I hope that you will too.
So Uli, thank you so much for having us here in your workshop in Neu-Ulm or Holzschwang. It's been wonderful to visit with you here. We really enjoy our time with you and in Germany. We like the German culture. And we arrived at an ideal time. I didn't realize that we had a holiday and we got to see what do we call it? What did we see yesterday? The beer...
The beer fest.
The beer fest.
The beer fest of that village. Yeah.
Yes.
With Blasmusik.
Yes.
And beer.
Yeah. Okay. Now that music I kind of think as polka, but it did not have the oompa beat constantly. But is that the same as polka, or is it a little bit different? Or?
It's been polka music.
Yeah.
Most of it yesterday. So no marches. I didn't hear any march. It was polka. Yeah.
So blast music has a few different categories.
Blasmusik means, so if you interpret it, it means brass music or wind music.
Okay.
Be it clarinets, horns, brass. So, but blasmusik stands for traditional. So it's not brass as such. It stands for traditional kind of music.
Yeah.
And I think it was the popular gathering of people who explored their abilities of playing instruments. They were working as farmers and came together and make music together. So this is like the American songbook, kind of like bluegrass, but in bigger orchestras. So we don't have, here in this place, we don't have that tradition, when it's about traditional music, that tradition of small music groups. That's happening in Bavaria, in Lower Bavaria. They have this kind of house music where you have 4 or 5 instruments, 1-2 persons singing. And this is more an orchestral approach of making music.
Yeah, there were maybe 20, 30 people on the stage yesterday, right?
So the same orchestra can be from 20, then it's small, up to 40, 50. So they just add more trumpets, more trombones. So
Flugelhorns.
More flugelhorns,
There were no trumpets.
Because I think the trumpet, I told you yesterday, and I think the trumpet, maybe I'm wrong, but I have the feeling, because I made blasmusik too when I was a young boy. Trombone.
On the trombone,
Trombone, yeah. And I remember that 100 years ago, 150 years ago, so in tradition, the trumpet with the valve, with the upright valve, was not a part of the local Bavarian Blasmusik.
Yeah.
It was the Flügelhorn, and it means, a trumpet shift by 90 degree
Yeah.
with valves like, I don't know the name of these valves, like on a horn, these tips.
Yeah. Same as a trumpet valve,
Yeah.
but a
Yeah.
different position.
Yeah, and with a wing tip and not a cylinder tip.
Like on a French horn.
Yeah, like on a French horn.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, okay.
You can describe it like a French horn
Yes.
when you pull it long, so that you have two parallel tubes.
Yeah. Because
And both, and then it's the same, but the cone is smaller.
yeah, but it was still larger than a trumpet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they have more. Yeah, it's larger than a trumpet, and they have a warmer tone.
Yeah.
But they don't have this mystical tone like a horn. But the horn, of course, the real horn tone means you have to have your fist in the horn.
Mm-hmm.
That's a traditional horn tone. Mm-hmm. So when it's a little bit blurry, the horn tone.
Yeah.
So that's not the case with the Flügelhorn. But they are larger, and so they don't shatter like a sparkling trumpet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Trumpets really cut through the mix.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this music is a little bit more moderate, more mellow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and especially with a big stein in my hand. Actually, a small stein, comparatively speaking. There were much bigger ones than what we drank from yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah, we had the half size.
We had work to do.
Yeah,
we had.
we had to do work. Yeah, so no messing around.
But it was, I really enjoyed that. When I come to a culture, I want to know something about where I am, and the traditions of where I am, and what that means. Coming from Canada and from the Toronto area, we have homes built in the 1970s that stylistically take from this building that I can see out your window here. With the exposed
exposed framework.
But of course, there is no framework. This is stucco and some decorative boards on the outside to make it look like this. So this is a feeling that is very familiar, and so to get to know something more about it is nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to wake up in the morning and eat a pretzel.
Yeah, to eat pretzel, which is also typical here.
Yeah. This is good stuff for me. And one of the things that strikes me often is, just a sense of time that is not remarkable to you, I'm sure, but for those of us from the New World, the sense of time here in Europe is much, much longer. But I think that we discussed something the other day, and you referred to it as a new building, and it was maybe 300 years old. And I laughed because if there's a 300-year-old building in Canada, it's a national monument.
Yeah,
like it's protected.
Of course, yeah.
It's not. Nobody calls it a new building.
Yeah.
It's something that's preserved because there aren't buildings that are older.
Yeah,
and it's so common here. And it's not just the structures; it's also your knowledge of history and the history of music and musical instruments, which I think is part of maybe the narrative and the conversation here that is just too distant from where we are, that we don't understand it in the same way. And so I think your view of time, my view of musical instruments is about the last 100 years, and your view of musical instruments seems to be the last 400 or 500 years. Is that incorrect?
Not really. In the last couple of years, I got more and more attracted by the history of instruments as such. So I researched more on that. When you learn luthiery in Mittenwald or in the historic luthiery schools, you learn that pretty soon when you start your studies. But I didn't learn that, so I dig deeper into that. But from my side, how I see instruments, everything that had to do with instruments was about guitars, electric guitars. And since I work as a guitar maker, my historic time starts from the 50s. And I see it right the other way around. I see the competence and what you said with old buildings and our history, which is so normal for us, is exactly the same thing that I see with you and other North Americans with pop history, because it's so normal for you. These electric guitars, and we were talking yesterday about Gibson mandolins, the mandolin orchestra and all that. So this is so normal for North American people, and for us, this is history as if it's 500 years ago. So we have to explore it, to dig into structurized. And for you, that was just, you just took it growing up in the center of where it happened in North America. So it's exactly the same thing with me when I look at American music. Yeah. And I see the same depth because times are accelerating, and with the mass media, what happened between 1950 and 2020 maybe is the same amount of variation of cultural output that took time 500 years before, from 1415 until 1950.
Yeah.
For instance. Therefore, there's so much inside that which is fascinating for me, and I have to research into that while you took it just by growing up. Of course, I grew up with guitar music, with rock music, but I always knew that it doesn't stem from my place. So we have German bands. Some bands are, such as Can or Kraftwerk, were groundbreaking for American music listeners, also in niches, I would say. But the mainstream of American of pop music came from England and America, and England had also in music. England is a kind of empire blurring out, and the future of music, of contemporary music, is pretty much oriented or coming from America. When you go to rap music, I mean, all the big trends, soul and rap, which is I have no idea in numbers, but I think it's the most important selling music. Music referring to that, so that everything which has to do with contemporary music comes from America, and we had responded to that. So when you say your framework, your fake framework house, this is my German rap band.
Yeah, sure.
And my German folk band, or my German Johnny Cash sounding like band, or singer. So this is our fake framework houses.
Yes. Well, I think
it's exactly the same.
What I think is interesting is when those syntheses happen, when the export to another culture and the influence happens, as you describe about England and the USA. So I think the impetus of rock music is in the USA, but the depth of rock music happened when it hit England.
For sure.
They and I think that probably actually has to do with the old world nature of England. You know, all the rock and roll songs were 3 to 4 chords before the Beatles, and then the Beatles sort of brought in all these different influences of folk musics and historic musics from England and from Europe, and then. Furthermore, with bands like Led Zeppelin and such, the music gained a lot more depth once it left America. Actually.
Yeah.
And I've never thought about that, and I'm a little self-aware as I'm giving voice to that, because I don't mean to say that the American music was shallow, but I think that it's interesting that there was the other influences, the other styles of music that were able to be synthesized from the older world, where there was more time to develop the musics, that were interjected into rock music, particularly. That I don't know if that would have happened or how long it would have taken for that to happen had it only stayed in America.
Yeah, I mean, with the start of the rock and roll started in America, but with the start of beat music, I think England was really the trigger for the youth, and I have a big heart for British rock music or British band music at all. So when I started to listen to music, the bands almost came all from England. To me, the ones I liked. But the folk music came from America to me. So I was split between listening to folk music, which I have no idea. I felt more pulled to America.
Yeah.
Because there were also folk singers in England, like Donovan. I listened to Donovan as well. But most oftenly it was American folk music. But rock and pop music was... So my perception was more British because of these roots of, how do you say the chords, a quint, when you have 4 notes between a chord, not a chord, a five, a quint, I don't know.
Quint is 5.
Quint is 5, so you say quint, yeah.
Quad.
Yeah, but the typical, the quintism of music, this is so British, and it's in America, it's East Coastish to me, like Billy Joel kind of music is this, I don't know how to say it.
A fifth chord, a power chord.
Like
the
a fifth chord.
String.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
You name it fifth chord.
Or power chord.
Power chord.
Because this was so indicative of the hard rock music of the late 70s.
No, I don't mean it on the guitar as such. I mean it in singing also, generally. So also in classic music.
Yeah, the fifth.
Yeah, the fifth. Yeah, and this is something which is not typical for America, but it's so typical for England. And I have no idea why it. I think it. So if I listen to British bands, there is always the fifth in somehow, and it makes it. It opens it somehow. It has to do with longing, maybe for a naval country, exploring the world. I have no idea. It's just stupid thinking probably. But for me, the fifth is a promise, which opens my world too. When I hear this chord, I don't know why, but it is, and. This I find the fifth not that much in American music, in American pop music. I find it on the East Coast, like Bruce Hornsby kind of music. Yeah. So my recognition is that along the East Coast there is the fifth, and it's in Ireland and it's in England.
You know that East Coast, Northeast Coast is much of it is called New England.
Exactly. Yeah, and you can exactly follow, the settlement routes when it stopped. Yeah.
Well, that's interesting.
And where it took place.
I've never considered that before. Yeah.
I have no idea. It's just when I listen to music, the fifth makes me tick.
Makes you tick. And
I noticed that. Wait a minute. What are the bands I like to listen to, or where I hear the fifth? And it's most often British music, and it refers to the traditional singing in England. Like if you listen to, for instance, I forgot the name. It refers to the Celtic a tradition or history in these places, and maybe I remember the name later. So you find it there anywhere in traditional music, and you find it in pop music. So this was my impact for rock music. So I digested pop music always through this tradition of things I used to listen to with classical music and with traditional music, and that was my door into pop music. And it was not much the perception coming from the guts. Like blues was something strange to me. Pentatonism existed, of course, but it was not a big structure in our traditional music. And I understood what blues meant,
Yeah.
but it didn't make me tick that much than the quint music.
So how old were you when you became
fifth.
more aware of this fifth music? Like, because
I have no idea.
you talk about growing up, and it wasn't a part of growing up. When is this period of growing up? Like what age are you thinking?
Oh, as a teenager.
As a teenager,
yeah.
as is with most people.
So I used to listen to The Who, for instance, and not to the Rolling Stones.
Yes.
I mean, Keith Richards, he has the fifth. Keith Richards is a talented guitar player. He's absolutely my taste, but the band is not enough fifth. While The Who were the fifth to me.
Yeah, yeah. And so this happened when you were a teenager. Like how old, roughly?
What, 12?
Okay.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is pretty normal. Yeah.
You pick the music you like, or you are in a group and you have to you instantly follow the trend of the group. And I was not that much in connected to a certain group. Therefore, I choose music just after what suited me.
Yeah. I was in a very narrow group from a young age. So not influenced by my parents. My parents listened to country music, and my father's actually an accordion player, the button accordion player. And he played every weekend and has many records of his music, and he's active musician my whole life. But he's playing traditional Newfie music. This is similar to the Irish music, the jigs, if you know what this is, and they do a two-step dance and swing each other around. And my aunt in their 70s I'm exhausted looking at them. They can still swing around on the dance floor and go and go and go.
Great.
And I'd be out of breath halfway through the first song. Halfway might be generous, actually. So my father did this kind of music, and but I had older brothers who were listening to heavy metal and hard rock, and so I really, my earliest memories of music are not just my father and of this country music, but my earliest memories of music are Black Sabbath and Def Leppard and Iron Maiden and these types of bands. And there is no Jamie without this hard rock and heavy metal. So this guitar sort of sound is a soundtrack of my life. There's no distorted heavy metal hard rock Jamie. It's my whole life.
It just happened.
Yeah, it just happened.
Yeah.
And in the teenage years, when you experienced, I did open up to other music.
Yeah.
So at this point in time, I became, more interested in hearing someone like Stevie Ray Vaughan, Zydeco music from Louisiana, and the breadth of music became much more interesting to me at this time.
Yeah.
Funk music, such. I got a lot more interested in really pretty much any genre of music that I thought was done well, convincingly, authentically, which is a difficult thing to say. People want to say you're judging too much, but for my tastes. And so, I don't have this cultural shift for me that I know most people experience in their teenage years. But I was the kid in the young grade 1 sharing Iron Maiden with friends. I remember sitting around, we had these cassette decks where you had multiple headphones you could plug in the schools. And I remember sharing Twisted Sister with my other kids in grade 3, 6 kids, and we're all listening to We're Not Gonna Take It, and I Want Rock. And that informed my life. And so, the reason I'm saying this is because you make me aware of it when you say, in the same way that there's culture and a history here that you grew up with that is, to me, well, literally foreign. I actually somehow was maybe not aware that I grew up so steeped in this electric guitar culture.
Yeah, but this is something that I
feel
not noticed.
Actually,
this is something that I not notice only with you. I notice it with all Americans. So that it's the same normality to talk about the holy grail of rock music, because they were witnesses of that, which is for us so fascinating, because after war there was such a deep longing for that new culture, because it it set us free from the burden of our history of the 20th century. And we got it only second wave. So we had to implement it differently than you who grew up with. And it happened to all Americans that I meet. So when they talk about that, it's like when you go to Italy and they say, oh, this palazzo is from 1220. So it's not the oldest one, but it's still there.
Yes, yes.
And you say, oh, holy smoke.
Yes, yes.
And that happens to me if someone tells me how it was when Elvis showed up and was singing in America. It's different when you speak with an American about that than if you do with a German. And I'm not a diehard fan of Elvis. For me, this is just ethnology, so to say, to watch that and to try to get a sense for that. But these are all the sources of the mass movement of pop that brought our generation worldwide together. I mean, this is the reason why we're talking. That was not typical 100 years ago to talk with a Canadian if you don't do business, colonial business with someone from there. There was no encounter.
Yes.
Not necessarily for average people like us, you know.
Yeah. But there were still global movements, exports, things like tea, sugar.
But that was, but we are average people, you know. Yeah. We are, and our job has nothing to do with working in a kind of international business. It's just if you do something now, it turns out immediately internationally by itself.
Yeah.
So that's the big difference.
Yeah, I'm not trying to counter your point. I'm actually trying to expand the idea that this music and this industry around the music is a global export in the same way that, you know, some of the first global exports were things like tea and sugar and cotton, silk. You know, these are the things that you know, we realize no matter which culture you're in, every human being in the world liked sugar. And so you could sell it anywhere, right? Somebody wanted the sugar, right? And somehow tea was, or spices, you know,
spices was the gold standard.
Yeah, it was the gold standard. Yeah. And yeah, rock music somehow became one of these things that everywhere you took it, people said yes, like the sugar and the spice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it invades your veins instantly.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it puts the Spice Girls in a whole new light, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that thing, and it's that. Well, I mean, the title of this podcast is "A Life with Strings Attached," and the concept is literally all of the places the guitar has taken me that I would have no business being, like you just talked about. You know, there's no reason for a Canadian and a German 100 years ago, unless we were doing some sort of, you know, colonial trade or something, to be talking to each other. But the guitar has brought me to you, and I mean, you're a guitar maker, but you're also a guitar maker who makes a very specific niche kind of guitar that most people, you know, do not interact with. And I've really enjoyed the opportunity to share in your story and your work over the years, because as that adventurous sort of spirit that took humans to different cultures, and someone would come back and they would describe an elephant, and you're like, a what? It's called an elephant, and it's taller than your house. No, it's not. Yes, I swear to you, it's taller than your house, you know, and we couldn't believe what we were hearing, right? And I think that I have some of that spirit of the adventure in this way, and your instruments are one of those things where, in a globalized world where everything is familiar now, and we all know everything, and we can all see everything quickly, your instruments are still a surprise to people. And when we show your instruments on tour with the Boutique Guitar Showcase, NAMM show, wherever it happens to be, there's a funny phrase that happens all the time. People are like, "Oh, that's the most modern guitar I've ever seen," or "That's something new." Like, it's almost 30 years old. They're like, "What?" Yeah, it's almost 30 years old. They can't believe it because it still looks more modern than anything else that exists. With your instruments, somehow they're not trapped in 1995 or 1997 or whichever year you designed that particular model. They still say it's the newest thing they've ever seen. Even in the cities that we've been to with your guitars 6 or 7 times, we're still meeting new people all the time with this. And it reminds me often, because a lot of guitar makers or anybody who deals with a product for a long period of time has this feeling that I have to create something new, or I can't send the same thing again. I'm like, trust me, everywhere we go, people are shocked at what you have. Nobody thinks that's old or I've already seen that. And if they've seen it, they actually want to see it again. And there's this sense of timelessness about your designs, that they're not guitars that look like the 1990s.
This is very interesting what you tell me now, and it makes me just think about it, because it's just my guitars, it's my daily work, it's the reason why I'm allowed to listen to audiobooks working, so I just build them. But there is something understandable in that, and I try to figure out. I agree, so they might be somehow timeless, because if I would step out of my skin and look at this instrument, I also would do hard to put them into a certain epoch.
Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop is your premier fretted instrument custom case maker, and we invite you to create a musical instrument case unlike any other, one that's unique to you. Every Cedar Creek custom case is hand-built by highly skilled craftspeople using only select woods, Providence Forge hardware, and premium instrument-friendly materials. At Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop, we are dedicated to helping you design the case of your dreams. Find out more at cedarcreekcases.com.
So why is it? The Antonio is different. The Antonio is a modern instrument, but let's say with the other shapes, if I look at the most polarizing shapes like the Birdfish and the Tesla, there is a timelessness in. Yeah, maybe it's that I subconsciousness didn't follow design trends, because if you go to the production of design, everything we are thinking in consumer product and. The novelty is always the thing. It's and design does pretty much the same as fashion. So a certain kind of purple always returns in maybe 15 years, 15 years, 17 years, 15 years. And same happens with styles or with how you deal with shapes and forms. And so you always have and it's like an unagreed agreement, but it makes sense to preserve the fact of novelty for the industry and the consumer at any time. So as if we would all agree on that, a certain trend of designing or colors can return every 15 times and spark new desire. Every 15 years and spark new desire. And maybe when you work in design, I remember from my design school that as a student you also think in trends, because you are triggered by what surrounds you. People, friends, magazines, famous designers.
Yeah, sure.
And that didn't happen with my guitars, because there was no such thing as guitar design. Guitars were just made somehow. And they were not a part of the serious industrial design process. I mean, there were designers working on guitars, but it was not the way how to design guitars. While there is no consumer product left which is not intentionally designed by competent people who are trained in that and market research and everything. but by the owner of the company, and he says, "Oh, I like this, and this is how it will look, the product. Let's invest $200 million." That's not going to work anymore. So, but with my guitar, since there is no tradition of how to design a guitar, and my unspoken slightly distance to the design world as such, I just took a design that somehow suited for me to the purpose of the concept of guitars, and maybe this, because they don't fit into a design time, and that's true.
Yeah.
And if I consider that, because it's hard for me to think that way, because I might sound too self-esteem to self-esteemish on that, but it's true. If I look at, I mean, the Birdfish is very loud shape-wise, but if I look at the Tesla, it will be still a modern guitar in 20 years from now, and in 50 years. And the other reason could be because there is no response on that. It doesn't spark a trend.
That's also true.
So that you and a music trend, so you can locate it, lock that in the year 2005.
Right.
There was that trend, because the Stratocaster is always connected with various players, but probably most likely to Jimi Hendrix, and he died too early. So that was the moment where you connect. You being, where were you in the year Jimi Hendrix passed away? And what happened to you? And you had more hair on your head and all those things. So you lock it into that time frame. Same when you look at a Mustang. You can't disconnect it from Kurt Cobain anymore. And I remember, because Kurt Cobain, for instance, was something Nirvana I used to listen to as a real adult person.
Yeah.
And I was not, I understood what it, so through Kurt Cobain I understood was all the death of the other former players meant to people. So why there was this moaning and this deep depression for many people. And I realized that with Kurt Cobain, not personally that much, but since I was a witness of that time and was old enough to reflect it, what happened. And that led also, I mean, the death of Kurt Cobain led also to the lock-in of this very unimportant guitar shape in the guitar history, the Mustang, with a personality. And so you connect the design with a kind of era. So when you reenact with this guitar, you're always kind of, bound, constrained to that era. And that happens also to the guitar. And since there is no sonic oeuvre taking part with my guitars, they are still liberate, still free. Maybe they are this way, timeless. But you're true, they are timeless.
Because there's almost no indication. We look at guitars from certain eras, and we can look at the hardware, we can look at the pickups. These are indicators for us.
Oh yeah, you're right. The details.
The graphic they're using. The Fender logo is the Fender logo, but it looked different in the 70s than it did in the 80s. And so on and so forth. And there are trends, design trends, which happened over these periods, which are actually absent from your instruments. And so even your materiality, your choice of your soft touch finish, is no, and your choice of colors. There's no indication to which time period that was. They weren't the Pantone colors of the year. For those in the design world who know that Pantone releases a color of the year, and then you can look at it and you see those colors are the ones that IKEA is pushing, and those ones are the colors that's H&M and everywhere else. You just feel like, oh, that's the new trend, but it was actually a somewhat of an agreed upon trend pushed by trendsetters and industry standards like Pantone, for instance. Matter of fact, I had no awareness of Pantone when my first when I commissioned someone for my first logo and colors, my business card and sign for my first music store. It was called Revolution Music. And I can remember today, it was Pantone Cool Gray 9 and Orange 021. But before the designer told me that I now have Cool Gray 9 and Orange 021, I didn't know those existed. And at the time, orange had been this bad memory from the 70s and early 80s. And we didn't see orange in the year 2001 or 2, whenever it was. A lot of my friends were like, orange, why did you choose orange? 1 year later, IKEA sold everything in Orange 021 and Cool Gray 9. And we saw it everywhere because the designer I hired chose the colors that they knew Pantone was going to release the next year for my brand. And now we can recognize it. But to bring this back around, though, the 5 colors that you chose to release the Birdfish in, well, first of all, Pantone doesn't choose 5 colors, but how did you decide on those colors in 1995? Do you remember?
It was only 2 colors in 1995. It was the Birdfish that time had tone bars from sapphire blue, and pickups were always from sapphire blue.
Yes.
And the other tone bars were in fire red. And I choose that color to distinguish them, to distinguish the tone wood, the timber from the other ones.
Yes.
So I did this until, so my choice was there is blue tone bars and red tone bars, which made it a little bit contrastful when you played the red tone bars with the blue pickups, because they were blue anyway. And I changed that in 2005. So I made it for 10 years.
So for 10 years only in that way.
Yeah, and in 2005 I expanded the color palette. And made the guitars monochrome. So pickups and tone bars had all the same color, and the tone bars were marked with the name of the timber so that you can choose it.
Okay, so I'll restate my question. How did you choose sapphire and fire?
Because I liked them. I think they suited. So the neck was always bird's eye maple. So when I made the first prototypes, I had all combinations, like a mahogany neck with a rosewood fingerboard, ebony fingerboard on a bird's eye maple, and that was for the first Frankfurt Messe. And right after the Messe, I decided the Birdfish from now on will have only a bird's eye maple neck with bird's eye maple fingerboard. And for that shade of the neck, I liked sapphire blue most. So that was the decision. And the most interesting contrast for me to that was fire, and it also followed the tone of maple, that it's more straight ahead, right through the door. So kind of signal color. But when I choose the colors, my intention was more or less to stay away from the traditional look of colors. Interestingly, I did not know, or I just recently came across the colors of American guitars, because there's one thing with the colors of American guitars. A guitar in a color TV society could and should be painted in any color that you can imagine, but it was not. So when we are talking about the guitar colors, we are talking in vintage terms like this candy apple red, and you name them better than me, because I didn't take the name so serious. And then interestingly, what I did not know is, and I hope it's true, but Rainer Tausch, he told me that these colors, like seafoam green, candy apple red, and so they all come from the car industries and were famous. And that's interesting that it ended up, the possible infinity. I mean, a car is different from a guitar. A guitar was a message to the spectators behind the TV set, behind the color TV, while a car is a tool to move you, also to express yourself, but it's, I would say a car is more a suit. It could be also shouting yellow, a suit, but most likely you will buy a suit in a certain range of color variations.
Yeah,
And this happens to a car as well.
but America, 1950s and 1960s, and the development of the electric guitar and the use of the Duco color palette, or the DuPont developed Duco color palette, this was a time where everything was about the future and getting to space and modernism. I mean, this is the height of, well, this is mid-century modern. This is
Of course.
the trend. And so actually it was very normal to have a blue or a yellow or a pink or a car at this point in time. In America with chrome trim and
Of course,
they made a
that time,
statement
but only
during
that
this
time.
But this is when those colors were introduced.
Exactly.
And Fender, the thing is, Fender was really, as we've discussed, an industrial company, an industrial designer. And so his use of plastics and available automotive paint and automotive lacquers, the nitro finish lacquer, they were spraying on the cars too.
Of course.
The same damn thing, except the car moved on.
But Jamie, my question is, why are we talking only about some 5 colors now? This is my question. So the color bloom, the explosion of species, of color species, didn't take place in that time. We are talking about the candy apple red and this and that and that and that. That was the whole palette of colors in that
There's
time.
about 20 of them. 20.
Maybe 20. Yeah.
But I know because we recently had to communicate them in a digital form and find
the
out what
typical
the
traits of guitars which remain from that time. How many really different colors that were produced on guitars in larger scales are there at all? There's a sunburst kind of. There's this Lake Placid blue. There is the candy apple red. Maybe 10 more colors, but not really much.
Coral pink.
But it's not that much.
Fiesta red. There's more.
Look at fashion at that time. Much more colors.
Absolutely.
And going back to that, the guitar was always colorful.
Yeah.
There was, so to say, a downpull on the demand of color through the burden of that pop history. So it always went back to sunburst, sunburst is also Renaissance on violins. That's an ancient thing, but all these colors were always pulled back to the 50s.
Yes.
And all. So what I really liked, for instance, one thing that was for me so important, and I think for me it was one of the most important guitars, was the Ibanez JEM in the 80s, because it wasn't taken seriously enough. But it was the first time when the guitar again took over and represented the spirit of that time. Just in a simple guitar, and it's still a Stratocaster. It's the same guitar like a Stratocaster with a modified shape and some modified details, but it was so up to date of that time. So I would not have played an Ibanez JEM in that time. That would not have been my guitar in this neon green and such. But I immediately understood it, and it was. I thought it's a huge chance for a guitar that this is possible now and is condensed in a major bulldozer, so to say, something that runs into the market and puts everything aside and will stay there. Because before it was that Jackson thing and working with different colors, but there was no mass effect, no mass impulse in these guitars. It was just a pre-trend that it could happen, but then it took time until Hoshino, Ibanez, took the opportunity and said, we do that. And that was the first impact, the first major impact, that there was something sustainable, a shift in the guitar development, and I'm not meaning technically development, but by its appearance, since 1950 something, In between, not much happened in that mass effect. And what happened is, we can see it now back from the future. Indeed, it impacted. So there are so many following instruments behind that Ibanez JEM era. And people might misunderstand this era as they connected again with a person like, for instance, Steve Vai, and think because of the popularity of Steve Vai that time, this guitar was built and it was so highly regarded because of, and it's not. It was about time, something like that. And Steve Vai was a gallant figure. How do you? The figure you have on the ship on front. What is the name for that?
Oh,
the carved figure.
Okay, I know what you're talking about, like the mermaid at the front.
Yeah, the mermaid.
Something of the
so there's an expression for that. That means it's something you present yourself with.
Sure.
In other words, Steve Vai was the endorser for that.
Yes.
In all meanings, the endorser for that, but he was not the source. He was not the reason for why this happened. And I would even say David Lee Roth has been, not playing guitar, has been by its spirit, by his attitude, much more an endorser for this kind of guitar, even if you never have seen him play this guitar. So it was already there in the air. And it was the company, or Joe Hoshino and Mike Shimada, who recognized with the Japanese thinking what is there, and we can do that now. So that was really a big impact, and it had to do with colors, and it had to do with distinctive colors.
Yeah.
Neon, hey.
Yeah. I mean, that guitar was released in a bright yellow at first, right? A yellow.
Wasn't it green the first? I was not sure.
They have green and yellow.
The signed ones.
Neon green pickups and such.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah. It was yellow, green, and pink. But I think the 777 one, the 777 were only in. Those were the signed ones. The first collectible ones.
Okay.
So to say a pre-series, probably, I'm not sure, but I have seen 3 of them with a number on the backside.
Yeah.
And all of them were in green.
Okay.
In neon green.
Yeah.
So I thought the limited series was only green. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know.
Maybe
I wouldn't.
Maybe they are sitting at Ibanez now, sitting together with Joe Hoshino and say, oh, he has no idea about.
That's all right. We'll
about the colors.
That one. The point is, they were loud and they drew attention.
Yeah.
And we knew it. And I think you're right.
And the colors we know were all 3 colors, of course. On the market, we are talking about these 3 colors, referring in the pyramids and you know.
Yes. This was a really competitive time in music. The musicians were competing in this one-upmanship. You know, it's I can play faster, I can play cleaner, I can play with a power drill.
Yeah,
like it was.
And the JEM was the sports guitar for that.
Yeah. And anybody who was really pushing the limits ended up with Ibanez. It was Satriani and Vai and Paul Gilberts and all these guys. You know, and
the only exception was Steve Malmsteen with a Stratocaster. Yngwie Malmsteen with a Stratocaster who
but this is
it was a kind of irritation. Why does he play a Stratocaster? Because it's not a sports guitar.
But it's also a tie to the old world because he's this neoclassical music, and this
he was an exception.
As classical of electric guitar as you can get. You know, the Stratocaster is a violin in that context.
Yeah, of course.
You know, he also had a dragon on stage.
But all of the high-speed players played the JEM and the followers of these guitars.
Yeah, and the Jacksons and such of the time. Yeah,
but the Jacksons were not mass market, in my perception.
Oh, the
figures were smaller than, so you saw much more Ibanez guitars than Jacksons, because the Jacksons were really expensive.
Well, they followed. So Charvel, Jackson, Kramer were first.
Of course.
Then ESP and Ibanez were the second.
Ibanez did not.
They got the benefit of the developed market already.
No, Ibanez was not the inventor of this color set. This is not what I mentioned, but Ibanez was the power machine running into the market and shouting out, "Here we are!" And everybody listened to that.
Yes.
While Jackson was something like the cool people
Yeah.
played Jackson, the discoverers discovered Jackson and expressed themselves to Jackson. But the variety of identities of the Jackson guitars was so vast that you could maybe refer only to the brand as such, to Jackson. But what was Jackson? Was it the Randy Rhoads? Was it the strut with the real strut shape without the round radiuses, but front side shape? And so it could have been so differently. Many airbrushes on that. I really like that guitars because they also emphasized the trend, but they were not, you know, the bulldozer running into into a building and said, "Here we are." That was Ibanez, and that at the end brought all these. When you say that the Jackson kind of guitars were the explosion of species in that time, the evolution that remained was Ibanez and followers. And Jackson is a kind of modern vintage now. I mean, not the nowadays Jackson, what Fender does. I mean, the historical Jackson are kind of modern vintage.
I would agree with that. And the JEM was something quite different. And the Universe, the 7-string. That was
of course.
We were all really talking about. Didn't know what to do.
So that was something that is directly connected to Steve Vai. Of course, the Universe 7-string. This is really Steve Vai, but it's only it has only a sub meaning in this Bulldozer impact.
It was a really strong impact, and I don't think that there's very many people talking about that because a lot of the people who are running guitar media and such are really still very focused on the first major movement of guitars, and they don't take this second movement. I call this the second movement.
Yeah, for me it was the second movement.
So they don't take this second movement seriously. They still laugh at it.
Yeah, and I remember when I worked as a repair guy on guitars. No one took those guitars really seriously because so Jackson was always more important than Ibanez, and simply Jackson was something like 4,000 Deutschmarks, while Ibanez was 2,000 Deutschmarks. So the more expensive was the more important for people here because it was different when you lived in Los Angeles. You got across the development, or you lived next door to door, so to say, to the heart of that second movement. But here it came over the ocean just with a delay. So no one took those guitars serious. They say the slim neck, which was a trend, of course, like a 17 millimeter neck, that was really really slim. But people didn't take those guitars serious, and the guitars they took serious in that time was not the guitars from the 50s, the vintage one, but the other two humbucker guitars which allowed you to make loud music, and it was not yet the Les Paul here, the trend. It was like maybe the ESP, not the ESP, it was the Jackson, which was more taken seriously. And the Ibanez JEM was underrated, but sustained.
They also didn't use traditional tone woods. Those are basswood bodies. Basswood was not taken seriously.
And it's excellent tone wood, basswood. It's basswood. So in English you say basswood. In Germany, and
we say basswood.
Basswood, but it refers to is it named basswood because of a botanic meaning or because of it's pushing the bass in sonic?
No, it's a botanical name.
Oh, I got it wrong. I always said basswood because it makes bass.
Of course it does. It allows a lot of movement, and that equals low frequency.
I thought basswood is the name for the tone wood taken from the species of linde. We call it linde, the tree. So it's basswood. It has nothing to do with bass.
No, but
it could have been so nice.
It could have been, and maybe we'll start a new trend now. But this is a classic German interpretation. This came up the other night when we were discussing that you couldn't figure out the etymology of something, and that was perplexing to you because you're used to being able to look at a German word and you can understand exactly where it came from. But the English language is not like that. We're a hodgepodge of things together.
It's so good.
It is one of those things.
No, it's so convincing. So let's change history. It's not, it's basswood, and because of the bass character of the tone. It makes sense.
Let it be written. Let it be said. It is now.
I can't accept anything else because It's really, I made prototypes on guitars when I started with my cover project on the CNC machine. So we cut different bodies, alder, basswood, maple, and we switched it because some people say tone wood or the wood has no impact into the tone, and it was always the case. What happened when you played the basswood one? No. Wrong. The basswood one. When you played the basswood one, it was just like switching the loudness switch. Like boom, it's there. So I carried on playing, and what happened to me is why I'm still sticking to Red Alder is it's a little bit too much. So when I listen to music now, when you are young, you turn on bass and treble on the stereo set, which is not existing anymore, but when we grew up, so and in the cars, always bass up, treble up, in the car stereo set. So that was, when you were young, you wanted to have this accentuation. And with a guitar, it happens the same way, like switching the loudness switch. But when you go on and play, you will end up at the grown-up basswood, which is the Red Alder. Because Red Alder is not only basses, it has enough bass you need. But it has only the baritone, or also the baritone voice of a human voice, which the basswood has not.
The mid-range is missing.
Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop is your premier fretted instrument custom case maker, and we invite you to create a musical instrument case unlike any other, one that's unique to you. Every Cedar Creek custom case is hand-built by highly skilled craftspeople using only select woods, Providence Forge hardware, and premium instrument-friendly materials. At Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop, we are dedicated to helping you design the case of your dreams. Find out more at cedarcreekcases.com.
Well, I mean, hang on a second here. Because the JEM is also a very low mass body. It has the handle, it has a lot of cutout for the trem system. The horns are very thin. And so in this way, you actually shift the frequencies again with this low mass, and you can sort of reduce those low frequencies and move a little bit more into the middle range.
Maybe.
Because of the mass.
And it started with a monkey grip first. So the monkey grip was a very cool statement, but unfortunately maybe it didn't do really well to the guitar because it cut off the wood fiber where it's really needed, where the uncut long fiber is. And it has
but it counteracts that bass frequency that you're talking about. That was too much in the basswood. This is what it would do by interrupting that long fiber, is it would push us into the mid-range again and reduce the low.
We wanted to have bass that time.
But if the wood has too much bass,
no, basswood without the monkey grip doesn't have too much bass for that kind of music.
That's the point.
For that kind of music, it's the perfect tone wood.
Material. Yeah, exactly. So the design corrects the material choice.
I don't think that it was the intention. I think it was just
not.
No, because how?
But an unintended consequence, perhaps, though.
There are. If you present a guitar, if you carry a guitar, there are only a few cool ways to present a guitar. It's not this way, it's that way. And the monkey grip is a very, very cool statement. It's a solid grip on the guitar. I really love that because it's a cultural message, the monkey grip. And of course, also a styling quote to that time, but it was a cultural message. And so, if you carry a guitar on stage, there's only one. Looking good with a guitar is when you have when it hangs low and you play it, or if it hangs upside down on the back of your head and you leave the stage. So this is a good look. I don't know why, but this looks good to me and to many other people also. I don't think if people think about that, but the best way to carry a guitar is upside down on the back. You need good strap locks, but it looks good. It looks really good, doesn't it?
I agree. I agree. Absolutely.
And the same thing is with the monkey grip. So you can do it with a horn of a Stratocaster also, but it's not in the middle of the guitar. It doesn't look that good. So So it's like the grip on the neck, which is good, but presenting the whole guitar with a monkey, I think there is something in that. And it was only a style decision, and they got along with the results of tone. I'm sure it was not intended that it was a correction of the tone. because the JEM of basswood, without the monkey grip, were excellent sounding guitars, and they sounded better than the I mean, I have no idea about the names of these guitars, but I call it the JEM without the monkey grip. Maybe it's also the name JEM, because in my mind it's only I only care.
It was an RG series or an RG 550 or something.
As I told you, I have not the names of the 50s colors. I don't take care for that.
Yeah.
I just think in sparkling spots in my mind, and that was the 3 colors, the pyramids, and that was the second movement of guitars. Very, very important, absolutely underrated, but so important. So, and everything that came after that were some derivatives of that, and not interestingly enough for me to follow how they are named and which colors they are using. This is more for collectors or for consumers. Yeah. And because it weakens the whole thing.
Yes.
And those neon guitars had all the monkey grip.
Yeah.
And the others, without the monkey grip, with other colors, not neon or sometimes neon, they had no monkey grip and they sounded better. They had more bass punch because of the bass wood. And so it was not intended, it was accepted.
Yeah.
I would say. So, but this is also the good thing a guitar is always, there is no guitar without a visual information. There is no such thing. Yeah. And you have to define the visual information. If you're a violin maker, you don't have to, because a violin is like a human being. There is a head, arms, body, and legs. And it's pretty much looking all the same with different variations, but there is no human being with 5 legs or 7 arms. It's not existing. But on the guitars, on electric guitars, it's existing, like 7 arms, 3 legs, 8 legs. But on violins, you only have the same shape like a human being. So you don't have to express yourself through the shape. You can do some variation in minor identity definitions of the violin, but you don't have to express yourself through the shape as such. But you have, or to the picture of the image of the violin as such. But you have to do with guitars. And this was so consequent with a JEM. So consequent like nothing before, and seriously consequent, because everything looked like that at that time. The surfboards and everything, the cars, everything looked like that time. While we always had in guitar history some crazy guitars where we even might sort in my Birdfish into that, there was something crazy at that time. But it didn't refer to a trend, as we pointed out before. There is no time moment of the Birdfish that you will connect it to. Right. But these JEM guitars, absolutely late 80s, so great.
Everything was about that.
Yeah, everything was about that.
We were wearing fluorescent shorts and t-shirts and sunglasses and hats and everything else. Even I had an Ibanez guitar during that period. And it was not a JEM, it was the Sabre, they called it, which Frank Gambale endorsed. It wasn't the Frank Gambale signature.
What was the shape of the Sabre?
It was still Stratocaster style, but it was tapered at the edges, very thin around the edges. But otherwise it was basswood and it had the same neck, with a neck on it, and basswood. It had a Floyd Rose and it had these beehive-like knobs on it that had 3 rubber rings.
I remember the Sabre.
A little reminiscent of what you've done with the Birdfish. Not quite. In that direction more than a traditional Les Paul knob is. A top
but these rubber rings were the inspiration for my Birdfish too.
They were.
Because they are functional.
Yes, they are.
And it's O-rings, it's a technical ring, so it makes sense to use that.
And so those were, that was the guitar, but I didn't cut the string ends off my guitar, and I painted them fluorescent colors. And they would move around.
Of course, which is also
as I played, because this was a time where you showed off. This was about performing and performing.
Absolutely.
And a friend of mine
performing in a new way, separating yourself from before, from the hippiness, from the rock and rollness. New blank canvas. Now it's your time to express yourself. And you could see who played the JEM. I could see it in my local place, in my rural place. I could see who played the JEM. And I said, yes, it works. The trendsetters, the kind of people who were looking for something to express themselves, were playing the JEM.
You could see by my shoelaces.
because I had shoe licenses, one that was bright green and one was bright orange, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Actually, if I recall correctly, one of my first times staying here, there was a box of your old things. And there was a pair of shoes, perhaps with Mercedes-Benz emblems on the front of the shoes. Something really crazy.
Only on the right shoe.
Oh, excuse me, only on the right shoe.
Yeah, the car has only one star.
Only has one. Was this something you wore in public, or was this a...
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, right?
When I was young, you know.
You were young. Yeah.
People knew me for that shoes, of course.
Yeah, exactly. And so we were trying to make a noise, trying to stand out.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly, yeah. And for me, it was the Mercedes star on the shoe.
Yeah. That's great. So this period was about, standing out in this way. But of course, as we do, eventually, it's very difficult to stand out in that way by being better, by playing faster, by being louder. And everything flipped with Nirvana. And that's when the way to stand out was not to have a bright and loud pointy guitar. The way to stand out was to have a dysfunctional failure of a guitar design from the 1960s or 70s, the Jazzmaster, the Jaguar, or whatever it was.
When that came,
and to not wash your hair and to not wear stage clothes, but to wear normal clothes, like a plaid shirt or whatever. This was the way to stand out. You know, in the same way that Impressionist painting could stand out among masters, right? So you didn't make it somehow better. You just made it almost. Well, Impressionist painting would have looked bad to people. Most people at the time would have said they can't paint, you know, or they think Picasso couldn't paint or sculpt or draw. And yet you see Picasso when he's 15 and he makes masters kinds of works when he's 15 years old. But it was a personal expression to follow an idea and to stand out. And so what's interesting to me is, you know, this flip happens around 1990, 91, around here with Nirvana. And
Sonic Youth as well. Not so popular, but
Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, this grunge era enters, and they all play these rejection guitars. Because I never remember his name, the guy from Soundgarden also had an SG-like guitar, but it was Guild's knockoff of an SG. It wasn't an SG. You know, and so they were showing rejection, not perfection. But
good rejections, brand rejections also.
Sure.
It was not like the Dan Electro rejection kind of wave, you know, the Sears guitars.
Yes.
It was Fender rejections and Gibson rejections.
Guild rejections.
Guild rejections.
And this was the way to stand out, was to actually do the opposite. I mean, this happens throughout history. I mean, the arts and craft movements, you know, the punk movement, the folk movement, the hippie movement, these are all rejections of the idea that there is a perfect something. Right? And this happens also. And what's interesting to me when I look at your work is the 90s to me are a rejection period, but you made this super refined, perfect sort of guitar in the Birdfish in the midst of this, what I think of as a solid time of rejection. You made this perfect.
You're right. It's also a rejection. It could be seen as a rejection. But
a refined
design then did a dedicated rejection, not a chosen rejection. So what could I use to provocate people? And you know, someone who used a Mustang provocated people who took only guitars above the Mustang series seriously, like the Stratocaster or Gibson guitars, something. But so the message of that rejection was only to a certain clientele of people who think they know about the truth of guitar. So probably with a Mustang. While with the Birdfish, it was a foundation or the design of a new product as a part of rejection. But I think the attitude behind that is different, because with me it was curiosity, and with playing a Mustang or a Jazzmaster, it's more a kind of punkness with no risk, because you don't have to hurt yourself with needles and all that, to get the infections, and really to go at risk. It's punk for the sofa, so to say.
That's great. I know you mean it seriously, but
yeah.
But that was
so, and that is also what I saw in this kind of rejection. I understood it. Now it's different. So I saw people playing those guitars, but I never took it as serious as if someone. Look, what I really love is Matthew Kors is the guitarist of Nada Surf. He's, to me, I see when I look at Matthew Kors with his Les Paul, and he's the only one of the few people who convince me playing Les Paul, also undistorted, and it convinces me as it could be any other guitar. He seems to me to play it with the same attitude as the rejectors, looking for a guitar that says rejection, like the Mustang, Jazzmaster, and those instruments.
Yeah.
So for the attitude of rejecting something, because the expression of his music could also be sorted into that period, and he's still making music into that period of rejectionness or next wave of hardcore grunge, kind of, which is not with him, but it could be sorted into that. But it's absolutely convincing, and it's done with a gentleman's attitude. Maybe he doesn't even think about that, but this is how I see him.
Not. Yeah.
And when I saw all these offset bands,
Yeah.
it was so intentional for me that it was not really convincing enough. And I somehow sorted out in my own recognition and acceptance of these bands, do they have this fashionable attitude of rejection, playing odd instruments because they are not able to express their attitude with no odd instruments. They're too weak for that. So the only thing is they do sonic fashion, auditive fashion in that way. And there are a few bands who did a kind of rejection in their music, but didn't need to go after fashion with that. And so Matthew Kors is one of the heroes for me in that.
You know, I don't know their music very well, but it always struck me that the guitarist from Pennywise, a Long Beach punk band, played an Ibanez. He played like a shredder guitar.
Yeah.
But he played punk music on it, which was actually really punk.
Yeah.
Right? And that's kind of the spirit and where you're getting at there.
Yeah, or look at Iron Maiden with the Stratocasters. This is metal.
Yeah.
This is punk, you know?
Yeah.
And not looking for the right guitar and then make you, for the fashionable guitar, make you.
P-bass with flat wound strings on it. And Steve Harris is playing a P-bass with flat wound strings.
Yeah.
Like this is really
This is
old. Like
this is attitude.
something James Jamerson might have played, you know? Like it's
Yeah, give me anything and I still kill your ears.
Yeah. It works.
Thank you for watching and listening. You can find more episodes wherever you listen to your podcasts. And a special thanks to those who support us on Patreon. It's your support that enables us to do this work.